Let's talk about how much the payments are. That's something that a lot of people want to know when they hear about it. Okay, how much are these payments? I briefly mentioned before that they range between $300 and $1,200. But specifically, for single filers, the payments are going to range between $300 and $600. For joint filers, the payments will range between $600 and $1,200. And there is a provision for an additional $300 per qualifying child. And we'll talk a little bit about what's a qualifying child later. But generally, the payment is going to equal to your net tax liability up to that $600 threshold for single filers and up to the $1,200 limit for joint filers. If you have little or no tax liability, then, and you meet the other qualifications, then for a single filer, they would get a minimum of $300, and for a joint filer, they would get a minimum of $600. So $300 is the minimum amount that a person can receive unless it's reduced because of the income threshold or is offset by some type of I.R.S. debt or other federal debt like child support or student loans. So if a taxpayer has outstanding I.R.S. debt, or if they owe, if they have a delinquent account, student loan account, or if they owe back child support, then the stimulus payment is going to be reduced depending on how much they owe. Let's talk about who is a qualifying child. I mentioned before that there is a provision for $300 additional per qualifying child. Now, the qualifying child would have to be on the return as a dependent, so they couldn't qualify to be a dependent on another person's tax return. And they would have to be under the age of 17 at the end of 2007, and they would need to meet the eligibility for the child tax credit. So those three things would have to fall into place in order for the child to be considered a qualifying child and for the taxpayer to receive that additional $300. Now, there's no cap to that. It's an additional $300. If the person has 5 kids or 10 kids, they'll get that $300 additional dollars. Okay, let's talk about how a person goes about receiving the economic stimulus payment. In order to receive the payment, you have to file a 2007 tax return, no exceptions. For most people, people that file tax returns every year anyway, they don't have to do anything extra. As long as they filed their 2007 tax return, that's all they need to do. I.R.S. will figure the eligibility, they'll figure the amount, and they'll send out the payment. The payment amount will be determined based on the information on the tax return. So if you have to file a tax return in order to receive the payment, there are no exceptions to that 2007 tax return. And if you choose direct deposit on your 2007 tax return, then the payment will be direct deposited into that account. If you don't select direct deposit, then the payment will be mailed to the address that's listed on the account. What if an individual does not have a filing requirement? And we have people that have qualifying income and that meet the qualifications, people that don't make enough money to have to file a tax return, or they receive non-taxable income such as Social Security benefits or veterans benefits. Well, in order to get the stimulus payment, they will have to file a tax return for 2007 because that's the only way you're going to get your payment. So there is a form, 1040A form, and it's condensed. There are only going to be certain entries that you have to complete. It won't be a full-blown tax return like someone who has a filing requirement would have to pay. It'll be condensed, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But the main thing I want to emphasize is even if you don't have a filing requirement, if you have non-taxable income or if you don't make enough money to be required to file a tax return, for purpose of the stimulus payment, you have to file a 2007 tax return. If a person files a tax return, there is a simplified method for filing the 2007 tax return. It is the 1040A form. It's a basic tax form, and you would only need to complete certain entries on the form. The first thing you would need to do on the form is make sure across the top of the form you write stimulus payment, because we want the service center to know that this is a stimulus-only return and you're only filing to get the stimulus payment. The next thing you would need to complete on the form would be your name and your address. If you're a joint filer, then you would need to put that joint filer on here as well and put your address. If you want to have a paper check mailed to you, then you need to make sure that you have a physical address listed, current address listed on the tax form, because that's what they'll use to go by. Okay, if in the middle there's a section called filing status. Now that's where you would select your filing status and you would choose whichever one applied to you. The bottom section for exemptions, if there are dependents on the return, you would list the dependents there. You would have to have their social security number, their relationship to you. Now if you had wages, then those wages would go on line 7. If you have wages or self-employment income, then you would put that on line 7. But if you only have, if you have the Social Security benefits or the veterans benefits or the railroad retirement benefits, then that amount is going to go on 14A. And that line says Social Security benefits, but any of those income sources would go on that line, and that's 14A. And you can use to determine the amount, it would need to be the annual amount that you receive. Now, if you don't have a statement with the annual amount on there, you can take your monthly amount, the amount you receive monthly, and just multiply that by 12, and then put that total amount on that line. Okay. And then on the second page of the form, there's a section for bank account information. So if you want to direct deposit your stimulus payment, then you would need to fill in your correct bank account information. You would have to have a routing number and your account number, and you would indicate on the form whether it was a checking or a savings account. So that's very important. Direct deposit, you would have to have the bank account information. And that's really the preferred method, because you'll get the money faster. It's going to be a lot faster than you'll get it quicker than you will a paper check. It'll take probably about 3 to 4 weeks longer, I would say, to get a paper check than a direct deposit payment. So you would complete that, and then at the bottom, there's a place for you to sign. You will sign the return. If you have a joint filer, that filer will sign the return as well and then date it. And that's all you need to fill out. So it's only a few entries, and you fill it out, you put it in the mail, and send it in. Now these returns can also be e-filed, so that's another option. But the entries will be the same even if the return is e-filed.